Shepherd.
Guy Mackenzie.
Good to see you again.
And you too, sir. It's been many years, hasn't it? And we did an interview right here in your lovely home with all your amazing guitars. I think it was about 7 years ago.
It was something like that.
No, where did the time go?
Where did the time go? Matt, you've got before I even start, you've got a very unusual jacket on. Just tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, it's not one I wear all the time, I must admit, Guy. It was one I got off an auction website. And it's a replica Elvis jacket from one of his movies. In fact, it's one we made earlier, folks. It's from a movie that Elvis made called Speedway, which was one of his kind of lesser-known films, but it had the great Nancy Sinatra in it, Frank Sinatra's daughter. And if you look at the album cover, Elvis is wearing the original jacket, and so I just had to get myself a copy of it. You know, I don't wear it often, but I thought it's a special occasion today, coming to see you guys, so I'd stick it on.
Well, Matt, that brings me neatly into what I was going to ask you, because you actually grew up in a small village in Cornwall.
Yes.
And you know, you're obviously not of the rock and roll generation.
No.
So what were your early influences?
Well, my early influences, funnily enough, were people who'd been in the charts maybe 20, 25 years beforehand. I mean, it all started with Elvis. Although I was aware of music in the early 80s, it all started really with Elvis. And I was just literally sitting in front of a TV one day, and that was back in the days when we had about 3, 4 TV channels. We didn't have hundreds of channels like we have today. And one of the channels was showing an Elvis film. And I don't recall which one it was. I just remember seeing this guy by a swimming pool with a guitar surrounded by girls in bikinis, so it could have been one of about 20 different Elvis films. And something just went in my head, then I just thought, yeah, this guy's cool. I was 7, you know, everyone's cool at 7.
And of course, your mother was keen on Elvis too, wasn't she?
She wasn't a massive Elvis fan, but she was of the generation, and so did my dad, and we always had music playing in the house. You know, so they obviously knew Elvis when Elvis was alive, when he was a big chart success. And my mum has very clear memories of going roller skating, and the tune she would always want to roller skate to was Jailhouse Rock.
Right.
All those years ago.
Your real interest, of course, Matt, and that's the reason you're wearing your jacket, and you've got a whole pile of LPs with you.
Indeed.
Is Elvis Presley, and you're actually you spoiled it.
Elvis Costello guy.
But you're actually a sort of acclaimed historian of Elvis Presley, and in particular his songs, aren't you? And you've also met the Memphis Mafia.
I got the chance to interview them on the phone from America. Sadly, I've not yet had the chance to get to Memphis. One day I will.
Firstly, just before we talk about one or two of them, tell me, who are the Memphis Mafia and why are they so called?
Okay, the Memphis Mafia, and they were dubbed that by the media. They were Elvis's inner circle of friends, and they were basically with him 24/7. They were on the movie sets with him. Sometimes they'd be extras in films. They were touring with him in the 50s and in the 70s as well, and they all had their own role to play. Maybe they were a bodyguard, maybe they would look after the tour, what was happening the next day, all those sort of things.
And they all dressed in a similar way, didn't they?
This is where the men exactly. You've done your homework, sir. This is where the name came from. One day, and Elvis was out with the guys, and it was at the time in the early 60s when Elvis was wearing very, very smart, slim suits, really looking the part, and he had shades on, and he just wanted the guys to dress exactly the same. So they all had these very smart suits made. They all had their shades on. It really looked like something out of Reservoir Dogs. You know, that big famous scene where they're all walking together in their different suits, and they were all walking looking exactly the same. And somebody dubbed them the Memphis Mafia, and that name has stuck ever since. Whether they liked it or not, it has stuck.
And of course, just mentioning one or two of them, Joe Esposito, and you'll have to correct my pronunciation.
Joe Esposito, Joe was Elvis's road manager. They met while they were in the army. Joe came from Chicago. He earned the name of Diamond Joe. Elvis had nicknames for a lot of his friends, so it was Diamond Joe. And he was a lovely guy. I got the chance to interview him. His agent was a guy called Daniel Lombardi. Very, very kindly set up an interview for me. Joe was working in Vegas at the time, where he'd spent a lot of his life with Elvis, obviously. You know, he shared some great memories. He was Elvis's co-best man. He had Elvis had two best men at his wedding. Marty Lacker was the other, and Joe Esposito. And Joe was his road manager as well, and would make sure everything was in line for when the next concert was happening the next day, and make sure Elvis had everything that he needed. He was road manager, and sadly he was at Graceland as well, Elvis's home, on the day Elvis died.
Okay, and of course there was Jerry Schilling, was another who you also interviewed. Is that correct?
Yeah, Jerry again, lovely guy. He'd just written a book about his life with Elvis, and Jerry was younger. He was only about 14 when he met Elvis in Memphis, and Jerry was a big football fan, loved playing football, and he was just kind of on one of the local pitches one day, and this was way back when Elvis could still go out and play football with the boys and not get hounded by the press and things like that, mobbed by the fans, absolutely. And although he was always loyal to his fans, and he knew that they had put him where he was, he needed his own space as well, and as time went on he couldn't get that. Whereas early days he could play football still in Memphis. That's where he met Jerry. Jerry started playing football with him and the guys, and that was the start of a lifelong friendship. And in fact Jerry went on for a time to manage the Beach Boys.
Oh right, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he managed them for a time, and now still works very closely in the Elvis world. Works, he's very good friends with Priscilla Presley, of course, who does a lot to promote Elvis now. So he'll regularly be at Elvis events. But again, lovely guy to talk to.
And then George Klein, who was a Memphis DJ right back in the early days.
And indeed, he still is, Guy.
That's incredible.
What a great... George Klein has got the most amazing voice for radio. It's just a beautiful, deep voice. And he was presenting in Memphis at the time of Elvis kind of breaking onto the scene, and it was at the time when Elvis was sort of like garnering local support from the radio station. So George, I think he'd been at school with Elvis as well, but became really good friends with Elvis after school, and when Elvis was starting to break out from his first initial recordings on Sun Records, and George was among those that would get the records first and play Elvis's newest releases, and so they were great friends all the way through. Elvis went to George's wedding. Elvis even paid for George to have some cosmetic surgery done. Wow. Elvis really looked after his friends.
Okay, and then of course finally Larry Geller, who was his hairdresser, wasn't he?
He was.
You have a very poignant story about Larry Geller.
Larry and Elvis became very close. They met in '65 at a time when Elvis's career was starting to flounder a little bit. He wasn't having the number one after number one. The movies were starting to make a little less money, even though he was still a very well-paid star in Hollywood. And Elvis's normal hairdresser hadn't been available, so Larry got sent to cut his hair. And Elvis said, "What are you into, Larry? What do you like?" While Larry was doing his hair for the first time, and Larry started talking about his spirituality, how important that was for him, how he was forever seeking answers to many questions, and Elvis was wow, me too, exactly the same, and that was the start of a big friendship. But the story you're referring to happened very late on in Elvis's life, and they were in a hotel. Elvis was due to be on stage that night, and Elvis was not in a good way. And his doctor, George Nikopoulos, I think it's pronounced. Anyway, Dr. George, should we call him? Many people did. He was in the hotel room with Elvis in the afternoon, and Larry recalls seeing George dunking Elvis's head into a bucket of ice water. Trying to revive him, and awfully sad story. And he was one of Elvis's best friends seeing this. So it tears me up to think about it. So what it must have been like for him. Anyway, Tom Parker, I refuse to call him Colonel Parker, and maybe I'm being controversial there, but he was never given that title from being in the forces. It was an honorary title he was bestowed for whatever reason. So I've always called him Tom Parker, and even though that wasn't his real name, but that's a story for another day.
He bestowed it on himself. Actually,
we could do our whole interview just on the life of Tom Parker. It's a very fascinating story. But he came into the hotel room, and Larry at first thought, great, he's going to see Elvis is in such a way, he's going to cancel the tour, Elvis can get his head together, get better, and be the brilliant performer we all know he can be. Anyway, Parker goes into the room, the door shuts. A few minutes later, Parker comes out of the room, and he says to Larry, he squares up to Larry really close, a lot closer than you and me are now, and said to him, the only important thing is that man is on the stage tonight. And then he walked out of the hotel room. And it was just, Larry's heart just sank because he realised that Elvis was on this at first fun roller coaster ride that just went on and on and on, and he couldn't get off that ride because so many people relied on Elvis Presley. He was a business, he employed people, and Parker had a gambling problem, and you know, there have been many books written about Tom Parker, well worth reading, and obviously many about Elvis too, but I think Larry realised then that was the beginning of the end, really. Very, very sad, and he was yet another of Elvis's incredibly loyal friends.
That's a really poignant and sad story,
Very
actually.
sad, very
but
sad.
Matt, just to lighten things up a
Yes,
little bit,
please do.
you know, you've spent, you know, you originally got a contract with BBC Cornwall for 3 months. You're still there after 23 years, but
Yes,
you're also
very
doing
lucky.
something else, aren't you?
Well,
Tell me about that.
Well, you know, I've been lucky enough, and thanks to the BBC Radio Cornwall for this, to do about 50 Elvis shows, either on my own or co-presenting them with my good friend Freddie Zapp. But I've never written about Elvis, never written books about him before, and so I do a series of e-books now. They're called Elvis Presley Stories Behind His Songs, and they come out monthly, and they're on Amazon, because for me it's always been about Elvis's music, and there's some great books already out there, but I wanted to make sure that every single song Elvis recorded, even if it was just like 15 seconds of a song in a movie, I wanted to make sure every song got centre stage, and that's basically the idea behind these monthly e-books. I'm not limited to space, so I can write about every single song.
And so how many chapters or how many songs are you going to be writing about?
Well, every single song we're talking, you know, and the remixes that followed after Elvis's death as well, the ones in 1980 with Felton Jarvis, the old producer, and then right away through. So there's a lot to talk about. I mean, yeah, it's going to be going on for several months. It could even go on for a few years. It could just take over Amazon completely. I break the internet.
Matt, well look, I just want to say I'm looking forward to reading more of them. I will try and stay with them. Hopefully I'll live long enough to get through all the chapters.
Well, you and me both.
But I'm also looking forward to the 40th anniversary show you're doing on BBC Cornwall later this year.
Yes, well, we'll be doing. I'm doing a bank holiday one this May, but also I'm doing my 2 hours with Freddie in mid-August on BBC Radio Cornwall. But I know we're wrapping up. But listen, when we were talking on the phone, you told me that you were the proud owner of an Elvis album, and the Elvis Rock and Roll #1, and you lend it to a girlfriend and you never got it back?
I sadly did, and I've never seen her again either.
No, all the records
disappeared.
Now, sadly, the original record, I hate to tell you, is now worth hundreds. But I would like to say thank you for letting me come along today, and I'd like to present you with this. Now, this is a remake, but it's actually on rather groovy green vinyl, and it's got the lovely pink and green lettering. So this is the original album for you. It's not the original version, but it is a copy of it. To say thank you very much for letting me invade your YouTube channel and your Facebook page, and I hope you enjoy it, and it brings back loads of memories for you. A little something for me to you, my friend.
I can't believe that. I can't believe that. I never thought I'd ever see that picture again.
My absolute pleasure. There you go. I'm just converting another Elvis fan, folks.
Thank you so much. That's really generous. I was going to say, thank you for all the help you've given me personally.
Oh, pleasure.
And selflessly, and I'll say that again, selflessly. And you also gave me a huge amount of help on 2 charities I put on for the air ambulance.
With the great Charlie Gracie and Graham Fenton, they were great nights. Me and Freddie, we both love doing those. It's been always a pleasure to work with you and to see you, Guy. And keep up the great work with all those amazing guitars you've got.
Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you, Guy.
But
Thank you.
Especially, thank you for this, because I never expected to see that again.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you very much indeed.
Thank you, Guy. Best wishes, everyone.